Do you love freedom? Do you love being clean? Then you'll love Hero Soap Company, made in the USA. Chemical and fragrance free. A portion of each purchase donated to veteran and first responder charities. Initial subscription purchase is matched bar for bar and sent overseas to deploy troops. Let freedom clean. Hero Soap Company.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Before I bring her on, just a couple of announcements. You can always get new episodes free on Rokfin, Odysee, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. This is where you get our premium content, regular shows, and all the awesome content from every creator on Rokfin. Check out the new podcast from the Forbidden Knowledge Network. You can get them all in one place. That's our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. Follow us on Facebook. Those links are also in the description. You can follow us there to get show announcements, updates, and all the other important information we're posting. And check out our merch store. You can get shirts, hoodies, stickers, mugs, and all kinds of other FKN gear. Today I want to welcome back to the show Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. She is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in a number of modalities, including working with individuals who feel they have had experiences with extraterrestrial beings. Most of her work, as well as metaphysical therapies such as past life and interlife regression, takes place at her Toronto hypnosis clinic, Lightwork Hypnosis. She is also the director of LMC Media, as well as a busy arts writer contributing regularly to a variety of publications. Lesley, welcome back. How you doing?
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having me back. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm looking forward to our usual mind-bending conversation.
Oh, yes, definitely. It's great to have you back. It's been a few months since you've been on, I believe. And last time you were on, we discussed a bit about your work as a hypnotherapist and the possibility that many of us are having profound encounters with extraterrestrials and not even knowing it. And I want to continue going down this conversation pretty much as deep as we can go when it comes to your understanding of this phenomenon. Now, I've had my own contact experience, and I'm not sure if we discussed a little bit about it last time, but I know that my understanding has definitely shifted since it's happened. And this is true among many other contactees and experiencers that I speak with. You know, they have a much different understanding once they explore the phenomenon, or, you know, especially if they've had hypnotic regression. So it's going to be interesting to get into this. Like I said, it's been a few months since you've last been on. I'd love it if you could remind the audience really what got you started with this type of hypnotherapy and the work you're doing.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, I've been involved in mental health care for a very long time. I've had a few parallel careers, but when I was just a freshman at university, I began working in a state mental hospital as a psychiatric aide. And from there on, I took further accreditations. Eventually, I became a psychiatric technician, which is like a psych nurse. So I worked with very, very sick people all through university, and I also did a lot of work as a psych tech in rehab, substance rehab. So that was my sort of straight ahead medical experience. But I came to a turning point in my own life where I felt very unsatisfied with what I was doing, and I was, sort of confused, and I wanted to do something that was not so medical in the sense of pharmaceuticals, and I wanted to do something in mental health, but something that was not about chemicals, really. So at any rate, my husband bought me a past life regression, which was really phenomenal. And not only was the experience itself phenomenal and enlightening, but I realized I can do this. This is something I can do. I mean, and honestly, Chris, I felt like I'd done it for lifetimes. And certainly hypnosis is ancient in the extreme. It's well over 6,000 years old. So that's even a great possibility. I mean, the Greeks had complete clinics devoted to hypnosis. They did it a little bit differently, but the same kind of thing. So I went and got the appropriate training. I went to the Ontario School of Hypnosis, which was the top school in Canada, and became certified and began practicing. It was a little while though before I began my, as I see it, my most important work, which is with experiencers. But what started to happen, and I can only say that maybe it's the law of attraction, but the clinic where I was working, maybe about once a month, someone would call up and say, I believe I've had an ET encounter, and no one wanted to deal with it. No one. And I said, please send these dear souls to me. Send them to me. And so that's what started happening. So I began, honestly, Chris, as I say, I didn't reinvent the wheel here, but I began adapting past life regression techniques, in which I am certified, but past life regression techniques to uncover and integrate and process and relieve any trauma from the experiences that these dear people have had. And that was, I think, about 13 years ago. So eventually I became a part of Kathleen Martin's experiencer research program, which is under the umbrella of MUFON, and also Ray Hernandez's free program, which was, of course, established by that, my brain, the wonderful astronaut, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes. Edgar Mitchell, yes.
We have the same last name. That's like appalling, right? my brain.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sure most of my audience knows who you're talking about as well.
I don't know why I'm concerned about past lives. I can't even negotiate my way through this one without, amnesia. Anyway, so that's kind of how I came to the work. And since that time, I've been blessed to work with many, many individuals. And I got to tell you, Chris, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this phenomena, I don't like to call it an abduction phenomena. I'm going to call it the experiencer phenomena. This phenomena cuts across all socioeconomic, religious lines, gender line. I mean, it crosses every line that we can think of. This happens to a huge cross section of all the people on the earth. In fact, we know, from just the reports, we know that over 14 million people have had encounters, and that's as big as, New York City. So that's a lot of people. And I personally feel that's a tip of the iceberg. I would say it's more 3/4 of the planet. I think I really do.
Now that's interesting. When you first started regressing people who've had contact experiences, did you, when you first started doing it, did you believe in it, and did you think this was a genuine phenomenon, or was it until after you've had a few sessions that you started to realize that it was a genuine phenomenon?
Very interesting question, Chris. And now I would have to say, in all honesty, that during my life I've had a couple of sightings, and when I was about 16 years old and working in a summer stock theater, I had some very profound experiences that completely opened my mind to this, I'm going to say, reality. I had things happen that were so significant that there was no doubt. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who comes to me is an experiencer. And, that's an important thing to remember, that I do always have to be on alert for people that are, poor souls or having some kind of dissociative illness, or because in Canada, in our province, and I think in most parts of the world, hypnotherapists are prevented by law from working with people who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, that doesn't mean people who are, neurotic like Larry David. I mean, that doesn't mean that kind of thing. What that means really is some profound disorder, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, something really profound. So before I see anyone, and I would hope that all hypnotherapists do this. I don't know if they do, but I have a big, if we can't do it in person, and now with the COVID situation, a lot of all this I have done online. So, but I like to have at least an hour-long conversation with the person who's coming in. And, by the time that's finished, I have a pretty good idea about what we're working with, and the fact that the person either needs psychological help or is having genuine experiencers. And if I feel someone needs help, I don't just hang them out to dry. I have a bunch of colleagues, more trained and more degreed than I am, psychiatrists, psychologists, who are open to the experiencer phenomena, who will see these people and help unwind the experience, because even if someone's mentally ill, it doesn't mean that the thing hasn't happened. It just means that I, unfortunately, am not allowed to work with them in regression in that way.
Right. That makes sense. Now, is there any contact scenario or, abduction scenario that is more common than others that you find, same beings, same places, events, things of that nature?
Well, there are commonalities for sure. Now, one thing that I will say is experiencers who are a little bit older, like myself, have had, generally speaking, more traumatic experiences because they've been dealing with the zeta reticulites, with the Greys, who were basically in an agreement with the United States President Truman and Eisenhower, and were being given permission to really take genetic material from the citizens of the world in exchange for technology. So this went on, and these are where you hear your most disturbing stories about sperm being extracted, ova being extracted, women being used basically to carry babies for short periods of time, and they're removed. I mean, all of these really terrible things are very much related to a specific group of Greys who now their contract is up. So that type of phenomena is not as common now as it was, and it's fairly exclusive to an older, more senior experiencer. Other than that, I would say that upwards of 90% of the experiences that people report to me are positive and enlightening, and they involve a lot of different kinds of beings. I mean, you would be astonished how many different types of beings appear to be working together, maybe in some kind of, Gene Roddenberry-like federation of planets. I think it's very probable. So, for instance, in the Travis Walton case, indeed, he was taken aboard by Greys, but they were working in collaboration with humanoids, and now Travis believes that they actually saved his life. He has a whole different theory about it now, but here we had a situation of beings very much like ourselves, indistinguishable from ourselves, working alongside some type of Grey being, of which there are many. And I also think that some Greys are not fully biological, that they may be engineered beings in a way for space travel. So the Greys are always involved there somehow, it seems. That's a commonality. And very often when people have been, taken and removed from their home as children, Greys are involved. They float them out. They float them out through the window, or right through the roof. I've heard stories of Greys being able to open vortices at will with a kind of a wand, and they can open like a not if not a stargate, certainly a kind of wormhole that takes them from point A to point B, wherever they're going. So we've got a lot of technology being used to check in with us and examine us, and the Greys are usually involved. Now, also, I would say in a huge amount of cases, there are beings that are very similar to us, or they're Lyrans, Pleiadians. They can be taller, but they're multiracial, just like we are. They're taller, but and there are also, and this is as shocking to me as it will be probably to the listeners, there are a great variety of reptilians, and a lot of them are completely benign and working with us on various positive projects. So it's kind of like, how we are in the world. I mean, we can make terrible assumptions about somebody who looks different from us. And I think as warm-blooded Homo sapiens sapiens, we have kind of a queasy thing about reptiles in general, most of us. Yeah. And yet we have a part of our brain that is reptilian. They don't like to use that expression anymore. They call it the amygdala, but we have a reptilian brain. So even some reptilian DNA probably got in there. I have heard individuals talk about beings that they call the brown doctors, especially children who are taken, and these beings seem as though they may be in insectoid. They don't like anybody to see them because they don't want to frighten, especially the children. So they usually wear kind of like monks' cassocks, if you know what I mean, like a hooded, robed deal. But there are insectoids, and there are benevolent insectoids. So things are not what they seem. And I mean, is it any wonder that we haven't been invited, like, to join some wonderful United Federation of Planets when we're still killing each other over bullshit, over whether is viable or not? Or I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And to talk about the Middle East, I mean, people that are all from the Abrahamic line are blowing each other up for thousands of years. Not to point fingers, but I'm just saying, as a world, we can't even get along with ourselves, and the messages that many experiences are hearing, this is a commonality, Chris. The messages that people are hearing are messages like, we are one, we are all one. You're one with the people on the planet. We are your soul family. We are one. And the other message is, clean up your backyard. The earth is suffering, and the earth is important to everyone in our neck of the galaxy. It's considered the grand experiment. There are so many different beings living on earth, and I think we might even have advanced beings living underground or in Mount Shasta and caverns. I hear a lot of people talk about inner earth, and I don't think all of them can be wrong. So there's the possibility we have elemental life. There's a possibility. Anyway, this planet, apparently to the ETs, is known as the Grand Experiment. And I think that refers to also our origins, that we were seeded by various intelligent, sophisticated beings.
Now, I want to go back to a second for something you were saying about a contract being up. I've heard this multiple times from multiple guests over the past couple of months, that they have information that there is a contract that has been, expired, that between our government and these extraterrestrials. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. In fact, a wonderful book, if any of your listeners are particularly interested in this, what I call like ground zero of contemporary ufology, there's a wonderful book called The Day After Roswell by Colonel Philip Corso. And he talks in very practical military terms about how all of this came to be. And apparently, the Roswell crash, well, first of all, there were 3 crashes, not just one, but we brought down these Zeta reticulites with particle weapons or sound weapons or whatever thing we had going at the time. And at least a couple of the beings survived. In fact, even Albert Einstein was brought to Roswell to see the last surviving being. So there's a lot, believe it or not, even more evidence is coming out even now. Einstein's assistant has just revealed this on her deathbed.
Yes, I've heard that recently.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. Anyway, what happened as the result of this is the Zetas said, we are having incredible difficulty procreating, our race is dying, we're in a binary system, we've been in a war and blah, blah, blah. And may we take a very little tiny bit of DNA from your people, and in exchange, then we're going to give you technology that you can handle. So along came fiber optics, integrated circuits, Velcro, stuff like that, and these technologies, which were at the time, incredibly cutting edge. These technologies were sort of doled out to various big industry guys like, the Skunk Works and the IBM, the big biggies. So this is what happened. Now, as it turned out, these grays were actually taking an awful lot of people and causing an awful lot of pain and fear and you name it, whether they were taking over or just for their research, like Betty and Barney Hill. Those beings were grays, and they were Zeta reticulites, as we now know from the star map that was presented to Betty, that was found to be that system. Marjorie Fish discovered that. So anyway, that's what happened, and it was time dated, and so we just don't really see those kinds of things. Now, there's plenty of experimentation going on, but I would have to say, Chris, that the absolute worst stuff that I hear about, is at the hands of some type of collaborative MILAB military black ops program, which according to my good friend Randy Kramer, it really involves all the major governments, and the US and Canada are completely in bed together and have been all along through all of this post 1950s repression of information and creation of a parallel space program.
Now, you're not the first one that's also said that this planet is very special. It's like a grand experiment. Based on your understanding, what is this? Is it because some people think that we're, trapped here. This is some sort of prison planet. We're like slaves for an extraterrestrial race to mine their gold and be, their batteries or whatever they are. But what is your understanding? Yeah, what is your understanding of our purpose here?
Well, I think, my belief is I'm really a great student of Zecharia Sitchin. And my belief is that the Anunnaki, who are very physically similar to us, they are Lyrans, but they are from the planet Nibiru that still exists, we call Planet X. It's in a huge elliptical orbit that takes 3,600 years to do an orbit. But at any rate, I believe that what we have read, not only in the Bible, which is just like a sort of a Cliff's Notes version, but there are truths in that. However, the Bible has been so edited and redacted that I don't know if there's a whole lot left of it that is, in fact, historically true. But if we look at the Sumerian cylinder scrolls translated by the genius Zecharia Sitchin, we know that the Anunnaki came here. They were looking for gold. They needed to repair their atmosphere. They were having many of the environmental problems that we're having now, as a matter of fact. And they did discover that, in fact, this entire world was rich with gold, particularly South Africa. That's where it all started. And they had a labor problem. They brought as many of their guys over as they could. They say there was 300 Igigi. They brought guys to work in the mines, and they went through some labor revolts, really, and so out of a necessity, their main scientist, Enki, said, well, what I can do here is, I've been studying the highest form of bipedal creature on this planet. And we're probably talking about Miocene apes, or maybe even very early proto-humanoids, not totally sure. But Enki said that he had been studying a group of these apes, if you want to call them that were particularly compassionate and smart. And so then began this kind of island of Dr. Moreau situation, where there was genetic upgrading. It took a long time. The first proto-humans, either they couldn't talk or they had various problems. And it was only when the Anunnaki added in their own DNA that it all worked. And that, in fact, I believe that, and of course, things got out of control real quick. And then you had the Igigi, all the workers who were taking humanoid mates. So things got completely out of control. And I think that is actually original sin, as the Bible portrays it, that purebred Anunnaki began mating with the earth humans. And because that was a big no-no. It was never supposed to happen. That was one of the provisos of Enki doing this project, but he couldn't make it work without it. So there you go. But that's kind of my feeling about how this all started. And then there probably is the influence of many other beings. I mean, you have the Anasazi people, the native peoples of the Southwest, who talk about the ant people. They look more like their grays. I think there were many beings that influenced the five fingers of man, as we say. But the Anunnaki were first, and that's why those of us that have O negative blood, it is the first blood type, and it comes directly from the Anunnaki.
Well, let's address conspiracies inside conspiracies here. You mentioned, Zecharia Sitchin. So I've had opposing views on when it comes to Zechariah's work. I've had some that do follow his work and believe 100% in that he was accurate in his translations and everything. And there are some that believe that he may have been working with the CIA to spread disinformation, and his translations were not accurate at all. Yes, I've had quite a few. So this is the, conspiracy within conspiracy type stuff that I have to deal with all the time. I have opposing views all the time. So I'd just like to get your thoughts on that, he could have been spreading some sort of misinformation to keep the real truth about the Anunnaki out. We get stuff like this a lot. There are many translators of ancient languages that concur with his translations. He was one of the very few, at the time, he was one of the very few people on the planet who could, in fact, translate ancient Sumerian. I think the man that he was, and I've been blessed to even know a few people tangentially, not myself, but a few people like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. I've known a few people who did actually know him, and I think that everything as I have ever heard is he was an ethical scholar. I don't think revealing this information really helped him in any big way. I mean, certainly there were some books released, not a whole lot, but I think that what he did because he felt he had to, because he felt that the truth of our origins had been twisted and forgotten, and that the current power structures on the earth use fear and bizarre religious concepts to control people. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. At the least, he got us looking at alternative history and things of this nature in a different way of looking at it and a better understanding. Yeah. So, there's definitely respect due there. Now, I want to go. So. I want to go back to screen memories for a minute, and your understanding of screen memories and how you can tell that something is a screen memory when you're having a session.
Well, usually I can get the screen memory to dissolve, or it dissolves kind of on its own as we go more into the experience. Again, it's something that is not deeply embedded in the sense. It's like we can get the person who has experienced the event I can usually suggest for them to go deeper and to let what they see dissolve. And we get then to another truth where either they're having an examination, or they're, on another planet, or, who knows what it might be. Screen memories, I think, and, there may be others that disagree with me, but I find them most prevalent in the experiences of children and teenagers. They're really used a lot for teenagers, and beings disguise themselves. That's, all of that.
Do you think it's so
stuff.
They won't, kind of freak out, and it'll be easier for them to handle?
I do. I think it's all about preventing fear. I don't think it comes from a bad place. Mm-hmm. I think it comes from, this is probably too much for this little person to handle, and we don't want to frighten them. I think it mostly comes from a very, very good and kind of protective place. But unfortunately, many of the ETs have trouble with believable screen memories, because they have a tendency to put things in that are anachronistic. In other words, for example, one of my experiences, who I actually wrote my book with, Wes Roberts, he was experiencing a kind of a screen memory, and it did have a surreal feeling to it. And he was in an apartment that was familiar but not familiar, and it was supposed to be contemporary, but yet sitting there on like a telephone table. Now, remember when we even had those, your grandma might have had one. There was a black rotary dial phone. So I guess they pulled this out of his head, but the idea is that it was incredibly inaccurate for anything you would see now. So the anachronisms will sometimes give it away. And once it does, it's like it just dissolves. And then you're in the actual environment.
Are there any like common screen memories, like maybe just like a template screen memory that's used quite often?
Well, I think some animals are very symbolic for ETs. Like, you're having a screen memory, you're seeing owls. Owls are often morph into grays. We hear that kind of thing. But I do think, Chris, that part of why screen memories work is because they're personal, and they're meant to be personal. It doesn't always work. But for instance, is it Jason Rice who has had these experiences? The guy down in Florida, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember his name now. At any rate, he talked about having experiences for many, many years with a specific kind of gray. That was his thing. And apparently they were always taking sperm. Like every time he had an experience as an adult, they were taking sperm. But how it would work is they would create a woman that was attractive to him. And, we all have our different, tastes. So they knew like exactly what he would find attractive. And then at some point during this process, he would come to consciousness, and there'd be some kind of machine on him. Know what I mean? So so very icky and very heavy duty. But I have heard about that, quite a few times. And again, as I say, this is not something that we see really happening much in a contemporary sense, but plenty of individuals who are mature, who live through this post-war situation, had DNA taken, whether it was ova or sperm.
Well, let's take a look at some of these negative experiences a little bit more and what could possibly be behind them, because lots of times, from what I understand, that the negative experiences, there are humans involved. There's military involved. It's more of an earthly type experience, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have no trouble being terrible to each other. We have no trouble with that at all. Look at like prison guards. I mean, you put an ornament on somebody and put them in charge, and there's going to be trouble. So, I have to say, we have a lower moral ethical character than many of the beings that we engage with. And this is the crux of the whole problem. And these military operations, they're involved a lot of the time with creating a new staff to ensigns and cadets. The military thing is often about grooming candidates to become part of the 20 and, as we call it, the 20 and back, which essentially means that someone signs up for service in the same way that they would in any branch of the military in North America or anywhere else. But the unique aspect of this tour of duty is that when you sign up, you are physically leaving planet Earth for 20 years, where you will age and experience and fight and do all the things that are required. And at the end of your tour of duty, through various technology, because we've had manipulation of time technology for a very long time, beginning with the Montauk chair and before that. So time gets manipulated. And I've also heard that you are transferred into a younger body, a cloned body of yourself that you bring on board with you. And you are somehow manipulated back into and you wake up and you're 17 and it's time to go to study hall. It's like,
right.
But the memories are suppressed. However, and this is something I really also want to get out to your peeps. I do not believe that there is any memory suppression technology that is insoluble and that lasts forever. And particularly the 20 and back memory suppression technology is inferior. It's like a Kmart knockoff. And so with these individuals who have been through the 20 and back, and they have been through, say, combat, I mean, we're really dealing with a very specific type of PTSD, something that you would see from our dear brave troops that come back from Afghanistan or have come back from Vietnam or any of these other areas of combat. And there's a lot of trauma there, Chris, because, I know that, again, I'm going to just refer to Randy Kramer simply because he's the guy that's had 3 lie detector tests and passed them all. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's the most credible of, I believe, any of these guys. And he was involved with some active combat. He even was married during his 20 and back to a fellow soldier, and she was killed. I mean, so when he woke up at 17, it's almost like he woke up with some kind of schizophrenia, because the feelings were all, the emotions of all these memories were all, turgid and rolling around. And my God, imagine being 37 and then suddenly having all that life experience and then being bounced up and waking up and you're 17, you got some zits on your face, and you're waiting for the bus. I can't even imagine it.
Right.
So
Well,
there you go.
this is where we like a lot of people check out when it comes to this secret space program and
I
things of
know
this
they don't
nature.
like it.
They
They
don't
don't
want to
like
hear
it.
it. They don't want to believe that this type of technology exists and this is possible. And I have to keep it as a consideration. I don't doubt that it is. I don't say for sure that it is true, but I have an open mind about this stuff, and I've had Randy on the show. I've had other people who have
Oh,
claimed to be in the 20 and back
hmm
program and super soldiers, and I allow them to tell their stories because I definitely think there's something to it. Now, the part that is hard for people is it is a fact that these people have been involved in some sort of mind control, MK Ultra type
hmm
torture,
Many of
or
the time,
many of the times
yeah,
growing up, and they're taken as
yeah,
kids. So they
I
do have this
know.
psychological aspect of, well, is it just because they were tortured and they had these programs and they were implanted with these false memories, or is there something to it? Because they truly do appear to believe their own stories, and it seems to come across like they're recalling this, like
I
like it was
know.
yesterday. So it's
I
fascinating,
know.
but it's also hard for people to hear.
It's hard for a few different reasons. Now I'm an American. I was born in New York City, but I must tell you that the things that as an American that we have experienced the death of President Kennedy, which was clearly an inside job, the assassinations
Oh
of
yeah.
other beloved civil rights, Medgar Evers, Dr. King. The whole idea, the whole really discovery that the Vietnam War was all about money and profit, Watergate. I mean, I grew up, unfortunately, disbelieving in my government. And I think many people of my age group feel that way. So I have no trouble believing that anything could be going on out there. And
Oh yeah.
also, having lived in I lived in California for a really long time, and during that time I was really busy with my singing career, and I used to work often for like dances or whatever out at these bases like Edwards Air Force Base, and I'd be driving through the Mojave Desert, and I got to tell you, anything could be going on out there. And I believe a lot of it, if I'm to take literally what I've been told, a lot of this stuff is going on underground,
Hmm.
and we don't even see it. But now you brought up something really, yeah, disturbing but so true. Is there were attempts, well, first of all, I would say that the people involved with the super space program, the interns and the cadets, it's very segmented. Like Randy Kramer was taught to be a pilot, and he's so big and strong, like a soldier. And I think that they have different tasking, different levels of, like, I have one lovely gal who's a woman who was involved, and her whole thing was about caring for like a kind of an onboard zoo that they had of foreign animals. So a completely benign but kind of loving thing that she was doing. So it's all very segmented. Nobody
Hmm.
knows what anybody else is doing, and
Right.
that's one of the reasons that they're able to get away with it. Now, I have I'm going to mention my experiencer client, Carl Dory. He's been on a number of chat shows, so it's perfectly all right if I remember his name now, or say his name. Now, what happened to him? Um, his father was in the military. Now, and this is kind of there's a commonality here. Many of these kids
Hmm.
that are in the MILAB or drafted in, they come from military families
Yeah.
and often are even living on the base or what have you. So um, he seems to have had involvement really early on, where they would even take he and maybe his brother like out of school, and then he'd be somewhere learning how to play like a mind game of some sort,
Right.
and then they'd be back at school and no time will have passed. So a lot of these training things happen again with manipulation of time. But this super soldier idea was part of Carl's experience, and what they did to him, and I'm not sure exactly how the torture occurred, but it was like in a chair, like a device. And this is again our own military, they tortured him so severely that they created what I would have to call a kind of a synthetic dissociative disorder. And apparently the idea was to have to split Carl's consciousness and have a part of him that would be completely manipulatable and could also bilocate. See, bilocation is a big deal. And the kids that are in the secret space program, they can all do it. And they're taught to do it. So this trauma, and this is how sometimes mentally ill people are broken by trauma. Their personalities are fractured, and it was this kind of thing that happened. So there's Carl, he would talk about himself, and then he would talk about Alan 651, I think was his, Alan, and then a number.
The altars.
And
the
altars. And what we have done over the past 10 years or so in our work together is we have integrated Alan 651 back in to Carl Dory, the man. And he is able to look people in the eye and function. Right? It's a whole, when this guy first came to me, there were a lot of issues, I think, that have now been helped a great deal. But this is our military in action. And I don't think that I think that they realized pretty early on that they were not able to control these alter egos, these etheric alter egos that they had created. They weren't able to control them. So the whole thing was bullshit to begin with.
Right. Man, it is fascinating and kind of terrifying at the same time to know that, our own government could be doing this with people and from a very young age,
Oh, man, I know. And look, and, even just recently here in Canada, it was discovered that at the University of Montreal, they were completely involved in MK Ultra experiments.
Oh, wow.
With, using hallucinogenics and God knows what, and sensory deprivation and twisted versions of hypnosis, and all that was going on in groovy, peace, love, groovy Canada. So it's not exclusive to the US. I never mean to point the finger, but I think that the most powerful country in the world is the US, and that we were the originators of the secret space program.
Right. Now, the more I learn about the whole contact experience, the genuine experience where people are actually communicating and having contact with something that is off planet or, spiritual, it seems like it is a spiritual phenomenon. It's connected to something that's connected to our consciousness, that's connected to ourselves, that's connected to something of the light that is a lot of people who have profound contact experiences, afterwards they become more spiritual, they become more enlightened, and they start to seek more enlightening things and more spiritual things. Is this something that you find common as well?
Oh, yeah. And I think the benevolent ETs are trying to kickstart us, you know what I mean, without intervening without doing the work for us. They're trying to kickstart us. But absolutely, I find that to be true. And I would also, a lot of the time, some of these beings that are encountered are not just extraterrestrials. I have to call them ultra-terrestrials, because some of the beings are not really in solid physical form in the sense that we are in a dense molecular environment. So we are engaging with beings that are quite evolved, and they're made out of light matter, and they can pass through our doors, windows, whatever, these solid things. And as I probably, I'm sure I've mentioned before, that I think the great commonality of why are some people chosen for these experiences and why are not others, I think psychic ability and a genetic interest in generational psychic ability is part of what's going on here. And so people are taken that already have a pretty high PSI ability. It just has to be turned on. I think that may be in part because many beings are telepathic or primarily telepathic, and they communicate with the speed of thought. And say if you were Jane Goodall down there in the jungle, and you came across a pack of gorillas that were using tools and looked really advanced, and some of them could talk, wouldn't you work with the ones that could talk? Right. So I think it's a bit like that, a bit like that. And then some ETs seem to have a feeling of filial responsibility, like you're our cousins, you're our offspring, we care about what happens, we want to help you. They feel a familial attachment. That's going on too.
Now, you said that they might be kickstarting us. Do you think that it could be for maybe global contact purposes, that we could be ready for contact with them?
I think that is closer than, we can almost touch it. I think that a while back that there was a shift where most of the people in the world, maybe only 53%, but most opened up their minds and began to connect with source and light up in a way. And, it could be that we are all moving in the process of moving as a species into the fourth dimension. Anything's possible. But again, none of this can really happen in a big way until we get our shit together, I think. And they're patient. The beings around us are endlessly patient. Some of them don't live physical lives that are measured by years. There's a lot of patience there in the universe for us, that's for sure. Yeah. And I think that we've effed up multiple times. Even the Anunnaki were using nukes on each other before they left for good. They were nuking each other. Hence comes the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's the reason why we have vitrified sand in Iraq. It's from nuclear activity. They take a Geiger counter over there, and that shit is still resonating. So I think we have effed up many times. We have to learn the law of one, that we are all one. And it's really just treat your neighbor as yourself. It's all simple. And out of fear and not understanding that we are immortal beings too, that we come out of the same God spark, for lack of a better term, as every living being. We don't understand the beauty and the power of that. And there's a lot of fear. And dare I say it, much of this has come from organized religion. Oh, yeah. I grew up as a good Catholic Irish girl, but, look at that mess over there. And they don't even have limbo anymore. That used to scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, what happened to limbo?
It's gone.
They got rid of it.
It's gone because it just didn't make any sense, and it's gone. So please give me a break.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now,
we can do the limbo, but
yeah, and I think it kind of morphed into purgatory, and I don't even know if that's still around. So who knows?
Who knows, man? Because they don't even. There's no more. You can still have one-on-one confession if you want it, but in the mass, there's just reconciliation for everybody. Things, So the old ideas, the old paradigm, the old male despots, have to go the way of the dodo bird. And I do actually have a lot of faith in the new Pope, because not only is he a Franciscan and bent towards science, but he came out and said, he told 3/4 of the planet, all the Catholics, he said, I believe there is extraterrestrial life, and it in no way makes it what's the word, negates our belief in God. They're all part of God's creations. I mean, he said that stuff. So that's a big deal. I mean, from like when I was a kid, if I look back now, maybe not, you're a young whippersnapper, but it doesn't seem so radical. But man, in my lifetime, we've gone from some extremes. So I have a bit of hope. And there's people like yourself who are getting the word out. Look at the programming on television. Almost there are whole channels devoted to discarnate spirit searches and ufology. So we are waking up as a people, as a planet. We are waking up. It just, it's just not fast enough. It's like we're only dilated to 1 centimeter, and we are the midwives of disclosure. We're just waiting. Dilate.
Yeah, there are interesting things happening. One of the aspects of the phenomenon that could be considered negative or could be considered benign or positive is implants. I've heard, different takes on the whole thing. Based on your clients and experiences, what are your idea of implants? And I mean, I guess it can go both ways. I guess the negative ETs can be using these as well.
Well, first of all, I think we need to remember that the ETs don't need tracking dots to find us. Okay. Yeah. That's, there's no, this is not, ID chips or any of these other things people imagine. Every living being emanates a unique brain signature, which is like a frequency. And that's how people can be located. And I'm telling you, remote viewers do it all the time too. We can all do this kind of thing, but they don't need that stuff to find us. But what the people I've worked with have said to me about implants is that they're primarily like what I would call step up transformers. They're designed to help us, stimulate the pineal gland or whatever's involved with becoming more psychically aware. That's really what they're doing. And sometimes they're given benevolently rather, to deal with a health problem that we may have. And most of them dissolve when they're no longer needed. And in fact, who was that wonderful doctor that did all the surgeries and removed so many implants?
Dr. Lear?
Yeah, Dr. Lear, who has now passed away. So in his work, he found, that these implants had EMF emanations. It's like they were giving off a radio signal, many of them. And he also found that they would often dissolve when they are exposed to the atmosphere, and also that they could run, they could move around and not be taken out. But I don't think anybody could point to any negative thing that has ever happened from one of these implants either being removed or discovered or felt or whatever. I haven't heard anything. It's just maybe, isn't this weird? Or I have a BB up in my nose, or, I mean, the implants have been used. Yes. Are they negative? I don't believe so in most of the cases.
Now, with everything that's happening, even just the past few years, I want to say since 2017, the New York Times article, there's been a big increase in interest in the whole UFO phenomenon among the mainstream public. But, even recently we've had more, we've had files released from our government and media talk and all this. Do you think that there is an underlying reason for that they may know of that the main populace doesn't?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's been a total suppression of information. It's anti-democratic from the very beginning. And the suppressed information simply insults people and assumes that they couldn't get their head around extraterrestrial life. And yet that's all people are watching on TV. you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's all about the suppression of information. They underestimate our ability of the human race to accept maybe our true history, because it's a whole thing, right? I mean, we have revisionist history, and we also have global amnesia. I mean, we don't even know how things happened. And I think that we are entitled to whatever knowledge is available. I feel we are entitled as the human race, regardless of education, regardless of financial standing. We are all entitled to know that we are not alone, and we have never been alone.
Yeah, very well said. And Lesley, I want to thank you so much for coming on. That's fantastic information.
Chris, thank you, buddy. It was always so nice to talk to you, man. And I hope that someday when travel allows, I'll be able to meet you in person. And
that would be great.
we can have a Philly cheesesteak or something.
Yeah, that'd be great. Before you head out, let everyone know if they want to find out more about the work you're doing, maybe schedule something with you. What's the best way that they can do so?
Well, you can always reach me by email, and that's Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis, all one word, .com. And my website's getting a little facelift. Actually, I'm the one that needs a facelift, but first the website. So that's by email, and I'm also available all over Facebook. You can find me as Lesley Mitchell-Clarke or under Lightwork Hypnosis. And I will just mention, do a shameless plug. If you're interested in good stocking stuffer in my recent book, it is called Intersections: A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact, and it is available on Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, wherever you Amazon, it's there.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
Lesley, thank you so much. Fantastic show. And of course, we'd love to talk to you again in the future.
You know it, man. I'm here. Just give me a jingle.
Awesome.
Okay.
All
Take
right.
care, Chris. Thanks so much again. Bye now.
Thank you. Till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.